I thought it was extremely important to convey to the people that were at the town hall meeting or the community meeting, including most of the family members of the five who were convicted. I thought it was extremely important to put it in historical context. I mean, they were seeing this from a very personal standpoint, and they have every right to do so. But I think from a standpoint of where this country is in history, virtually every religious minority and every ethnic or immigrant minority group has had to struggle for their place in our society, an equal place, a just place. And they find themselves at a particular moment in history where most of them are both recent immigrants and from a minority religious community that is largely misunderstood by the majority Christian community, and because of 9/11 and the threat of terrorism, feared. And people generalize. They don't make a distinction between an immigrant person who's fundamentally committed to the well-being of this country and has decided to make their home here, and some Muslim terrorist. And so I'm afraid that the 12 jurors were easily misled and misinformed because the general public is largely misled and misinformed. And then you have a situation where in the very limited time that I spent in the jury room yesterday, I heard the federal prosecutors, or more aptly persecutors, make a false statement that I knew was untrue. So you have to wonder how many other false statements were made in the pursuit of making sure this time they were able to get the convictions. They were frankly hell-bent on getting these convictions because the current Justice Department has hung their professional hat, as it were, on the ability to do this. And they have been egged on by the Bush administration. They've been pursued and pushed by the Israeli government. The Israeli government has had a long-term vested interest in shutting down charitable activities for people in Palestine because these are the same people that have been a part of the struggle in Palestine. Right or wrong, it doesn't make any difference to me what the folks in Palestine were doing. What was going on in this country was a charitable activity, one that is protected by our Constitution, one that I believe the five people that have been subject to this trial are not guilty of committing any crime, but have been persecuted because of where they are in history. It's a political situation. This was a political trial as far as I'm concerned, as far as a lot of other civil liberties organizations are concerned, and that's the reason the appeal and the pursuit of justice is so important. So going back to my original comments last night, it was a very emotional, personal time for a lot of people in that room, the family members as well as the longtime committed supporters, but they needed to recognize it in a larger context and the importance of continuing to support these five men in this post-conviction period, and to support them through the appeal process and support them in the jail. As far as I'm concerned, they're just like many other people that have been unjustly jailed for their political activities.
Within the historical context of ethnic groups and other groups fighting for equal rights in America, for example, we had a labor movement, we had a women's suffrage movement. African Americans have been fighting for their rights for a long time. Latin and Hispanic groups are now in the forefront for rights. What is your advice or instructions to Muslims in North America who might be looking at this as a setback, Muslims who are demoralized by this verdict? What would you tell them to do in the near term and the long term?
Well, it's definitely a minor setback because we obviously would have preferred a different outcome of the trial, but it needs to be kept in the context of the struggle. And the struggle is Muslims are a minority in this community. They're not understood. They're in fact feared by many people because of what happened on 9/11. It's not fair. That's a broad brush of an entire religious community based on the activity of 18 or 19 people. That's not fair. That's not right. But in the context of what the Muslim community in North America needs to recognize is it's a part of a process. And yes, there are victims that are part of this process. There is always going to be victims in the struggle for justice. Africans were forcibly brought here, and they've been in a 400-plus year struggle for justice. They had a notable gain this fall in the national elections. Hispanics are a part of an occupied people because they are a mestizo race. They were here before the other Europeans from the East Coast were here. They have been subjected to a lot of things. I think it's more roughly analogous to the way the Irish Catholic immigrant was treated in the early part of the 19th century as a religious minority. They were coming into this country. They were an ethnic minority. They spoke English, but it wasn't the same kind of English. The Irish Catholics had a lot to overcome in this country. I think the country has made a lot of progress, but it's still not there. And at this point in history, the Muslim community has a lot of work to do, and a lot of that has to do with more and more their leaders are going to have to be willing to interact with the dominant community leadership, which is one of the things that we've been involved with at the Peace Center for a number of years, which is just to encourage more visibility and interaction in the larger community by the Muslim community.